Welcome to the PA Books podcast. PA Books is a production of PCN, the Pennsylvania Cable Network. This program features interviews with authors of books on Pennsylvania people, history, sports, business, nature, and politics. While the focus is always on Pennsylvania, topics like the Revolutionary War, the Battle of Gettysburg, the Industrial Revolution, the coal and steel industries, and authors like John Updike, David McCullough, and John Grogan have a universal appeal. We hope you enjoy this podcast.
This week on PA Books, Senator Robert Jubelirer, author of The Senate Will Come to Order.
Senator Robert Jubelirer, author of The Senate Will Come to Order, but the politics may be messy. How old were you when you decided you wanted to go into politics?
I think I just got out of the womb. I'm not sure. I was pretty young. I can't say how young, but I remember my father, who was an attorney, coming home. He always had the Philadelphia Inquirer and the Altoona Mirror, of course. And I would read the Philadelphia Inquirer and see the names of Richardson Dilworth and Joe Clark and others, and I would follow it. I probably was, maybe 9, 10, 11, but I wasn't very old. It just was a terrific interest for me.
What did your dad do? That he was a lawyer and also ran for judge?
My father was a judge then.
Was it an elected office?
Yes. Yeah, he was elected to a 10-year term as judge at the Court of Common Pleas of Blair County later in his career. He was a trial lawyer, defense lawyer, criminal defense, and plaintiff's lawyer, and a very, very good lawyer. And as I say, late in his career, he capped it off with running for judge, which didn't pay what it does today. I think it was $22,500. But he was a brilliant, he had a brilliant legal mind. The best way to define him is to tell you that the nearly 10 years he was there, and he had to resign because he had Parkinson's disease, he was never reversed and that's when all the criminal procedures and warnings and so forth were coming down from the United States Supreme Court. But he kept up with it. He was quite a guy.
You grew up in Altoona?
I did.
What was the town like when you were growing up?
Well, it was a railroad town. And I think to an extent there will never be a distance from that term, a railroad town, the Pennsylvania Railroad. And I had normal growing up. I had friends. We lived in a I'd say a middle-class neighborhood, and I just kind of grew up and not knowing anything else other than the fact that my dad was a lawyer, my mom was one time was a teacher, but she was a homemaker, and we lived well. My dad got through the Depression because he was a criminal defense lawyer, and probably none of your viewers would remember Walter Winchell, but he was mentioned on Walter Winchell. If you want to commit murder and you need a defense lawyer, see Sam Jubelirer in Altoona, Pennsylvania. So,
were you a good student?
Oh boy, there's a question. Was I a good student? I was in high school and in elementary school. I was a good student. I wasn't ready for college. Altoona High School has changed dramatically. It's so far better than it was when I went to high school, and I didn't do as well in college as I did in my previous educational visits to school.
College where?
Penn State University. We are. Yeah, absolutely. But I did well in law school, so.
So you struggled when you got to Penn State?
I did. I did struggle when I got to Penn State. I didn't feel I was ready, and that I hadn't been prepared in the public school system at that time. That has changed, as I said, dramatically now in Altoona. But I get to law school, and I think I finished 14th in my class, or 13th in my class.
Did you have law school in mind when you first went to Penn State?
Probably. I was, the whole family did the same thing. My brother was an attorney and went to Penn State and to Dickinson Law School, and I followed him. He was 8 years older, but and he had been in the service, but I did the same thing. I went to Penn State. I looked at a couple other schools, but Penn State has from day one has always been in my heart and still is, because I'm now a trustee of the university, and it's a high honor for me.
You said you grew up reading the Philadelphia Inquirer and reading about the
I
Philadelphia
did.
politicians. Did you ever have an inkling to move off to Philadelphia and get involved in that?
No, not at all. Interesting, though, my son and daughter both live in the suburbs of Philadelphia, and so I get to see them from time to time, and including this past weekend, which was my birthday.
Now, quite a bit of time passed between the time you finished law school and when you first ran for office. What did you do in those years?
Interesting, really a good, interesting question. I got involved in 1962 in the campaign of William W. Scranton. My father and the Republican state chairman, George Bloom, were fraternity brothers at the University of Pittsburgh Law School. And anyhow, George Bloom called my father and my brother and said, "We need a driver in western Pennsylvania to run a sound wagon. We have central Pennsylvania and eastern Pennsylvania covered, but we need one in western Pennsylvania." Well, I couldn't do anything because I had to wait for the results of the bar exam. And so here I come. And I was so excited that I was going to have this opportunity. And I drove a sound wagon around, Bill Scranton, and at the time, Jimmy Van Zandt was running for the U.S. Senate, and he was from Altoona.
What's a sound wagon?
A sound wagon is like today would be a SUV. It was a station wagon then, with a sound piece on top, so that there was a built-in microphone, and I would say, "Come to the YMCA at 7 o'clock, meet Republican candidate for governor Bill Scranton. Refreshments will be served," or something like that. And I would go through town and do that. It's a hoot, really. But I look back, but I was involved, and I got to meet Bill Scranton and Ray Schaefer, who was a candidate for lieutenant governor, and Walter Alcindroni. Those days probably helped shape my interest, and I just wanted to be involved. And interesting enough, after I'd passed the bar, I found out I passed the bar exam and was going into practice. I had been involved with a man by the name of John Tabor, Tabor, from Pittsburgh, who became a mentor to me. He was chairman of Citizens for Scranton in western Pennsylvania, and he ended up being nominated by Governor Scranton and confirmed by the Senate for the secretary, I don't know, of properties or something like that. It's all changed, and I wanted to go with him. And I didn't want to go practice law. I want to go to Harrisburg and so forth, et cetera. And my father almost had a conniption.
Did he expect you to go into practice with him? Your
Not
father?
with him, because he was not in the practice at that time. He was on the bench. But he certainly expected me to go into the practice. My brother was in the practice. My uncle was in the practice. So, yes, I was expected. And interesting, George Bloom told me, "Don't ever depend on politics for your livelihood. You should not do that. Go back and learn how to be a lawyer." And then if you want to get into politics, you can maybe do it on the sideline and so forth. And my father said, yay. And I did. I went back and learned my ABCs about how to be a prominent trial lawyer, and I was a decent trial lawyer.
You did not take the job in Harrisburg?
No, I did not take the job in Harrisburg, and went back and I did learn how to be a lawyer at least, and for so many years until I ran for office, and I was determined that I was going to try it, and for some reason it was the Senate that appealed to me. And we had an incumbent, and I still felt that I was one to do it. The incumbent was going to retire, and I felt this was my time. It was going to be now or never. So in the great Watergate year of 1974, this Republican who really was so wet behind the ears, it wasn't even funny.
That was the year of all the Watergate babies where the Democrats were all
Oh,
elected.
yes, it sure was. I had a door slammed in my face. I had a guy spit at me. Like, because I was a Republican, I was responsible for Watergate. Not easy. And as I was going door to door, I had a lot of folks who thought I was President Nixon, I guess, but who were really so angry with the Republican Party, and it made it very tough for me, and I had a very, very worthy opponent.
Why were you a Republican?
My father was a Republican, my mother was a Republican. I think that's how most people do. You have a chance to change, but I grew up in a Republican area in Blair County, was heavily Republican, and I just went with the flow, actually.
What was the Senate district?
The Senate district at the time I ran, the Senate district at the time I ran was different than it was the second time. It was Blair County, which was the key county, my home county, Bedford County, a chunk of Somerset County, by the way, which is where the 9/11 memorial is. Blair, Bedford, Huntington County, and two townships in Mifflin County, Union and Meadow.
Were some of
Township.
those parts of the district areas you were completely unfamiliar with?
Oh, yeah. My goodness, yes. I mean, I knew something about Bedford and Huntington counties. Blair I knew, and thank goodness. And but that piece of Somerset and Mifflin, there was a gentleman who's now county commissioner in Mifflin County who had total control over those two counties, and he wasn't for me. So I got smashed in those two counties. But having said that, he also told me, if you win, I promise you will get my support and so forth. And he did, and we smashed. Then I was running.
Who was your opponent in the primary?
His name was Roy Ogburn, O-G-B-U-R-N, or B-O-R-N. He was the executive assistant to then Minority Leader of the United States Senate, Hugh Scott. And you want to talk about gerrymandering? They gerrymandered that piece of Somerset County into the 30th Senatorial District so he could run. He did not want to go west. He wanted to go east. He felt it was more, and he was right, it was far more Republican. And so I ended up running against him. He would bring checks and everything into the counties. He would show up at different things that the county commissioners suggested to him. He had them all. And I had a very difficult time. In the final analysis, I lost 4 counties, but I won Blair big. And that was enough to win by 1,800 votes.
Were there issues?
Were there issues? I think by that time, there was not anything that we were so differing on. He was saying that he knew how to bring things back to the district because he had been in Washington with Hugh Scott. Interesting, I'll tell you a funny story. We found letters under Hugh Scott's senatorial stamp that Hugh Scott had sent out in favor promoting Roy Ogburn. So what I did, I put those letters, there was just maybe a half a dozen of them that we found. I put them in an envelope, and I knew Senator Scott, and I wrote him a note. I said, I'm sure you would not want this under your franking privilege, and I suggest that I hope there, or I said, I hope there's no more, so forth. And he reimbursed the Senate. I forget what the cost of the stamp was at that time, but he reimbursed them, maybe $1 or something like that. So those are the funny things. So
that was your first experience at campaigning for yourself?
Mm-hmm. I campaigned for others, but it was the first experience of campaigning. First election I had ever been in.
Did you like it?
I loved it. I really did. I enjoyed it. I loved meeting people. I loved talking to them about their problems. I never stopped that, by the way. That carried through to me all the way through my tenure as president pro tempore and the number of elections that I had been successful in. But I enjoyed people, and I enjoyed hearing them, and I enjoyed being able to, and particularly as president pro tempore, to have the power to bring back things that were quality of life enhancements for my district.
How did you raise money for your first campaign?
I'm sorry, what?
How did you raise money for your first campaign?
I raised money by cashing in some life insurance, or borrowing, I guess I should say. I had a nice committee, I did. I can tell you exactly what it was. It was the same in the primary, but it was a lot easier in the general, because I had help from the state party. It was $45,000. Today, the same thing, oh my, it would be several $100,000. But it was $45,000, and I didn't have that kind of money, and I borrowed for my life insurance, and there were people who contributed, but it was not easy.
So you won the primary?
I won the primary.
Fairly close.
1,800 votes. I can still remember.
And was the general election kind of a foregone conclusion in that part of the state?
Yeah, it was, that I was going to lose.
Really?
Yeah, it was. The general, I know, you're looking that way.
You said it was a heavily Republican area.
I'll tell you why. There was an incumbent House member, Democrat, in the city of Altoona, Democrat, and impossible, but he won. His name was Denny Bixler. He owned a radio station. He was very popular in the city of Altoona, and he was on the air. He got away with it, even as a candidate, because he owned the station. I think he had a program of his own at that time, and I really was the underdog. A couple of things happened. If we want stories, there are two things that happened that I think changed everything. I was on the path to lose. We had two debates, one in Juniata College in Huntington, and the other at Penn State Altoona. One thing about Denny was absent a great deal. He just didn't like going. He was not well liked by his colleagues in the Democratic caucus, and he always kind of put them down, put the whole House down. And anyhow, what happened was during the debate, he missed. I knew he had missed a vote on the fact that the income tax had gone up, and anyhow, I suckered him into. We got into it, and he repeated the income tax that had been replaced, and I didn't say anything. He chided me. He said, "You don't know what the income tax is." Stuff. I let it go, because there was no media there. And so I knew we had another debate in Altoona a week later. I think I was smarter in those days. Anyhow, it worked to perfection. We did the same thing, and he got up and he railed at me. He said, "I told you last week you don't know what the income tax is. How do you expect to be in the Pennsylvania Senate?" I had the bill that was signed by the governor changing it, and I read it, and I said, "You are the one, Mr. Bixler, who doesn't there because you don't show up half the time. You've been absent so often." I hammered him. I mean, that was teed up for me. It was easy, and the other thing he did, there were two Bedford County legislators retiring. The one I was hoped to replace, Stanley Stroup, and the House member. And there was a dinner, a Lions Club dinner. It's either in Bedford or Breezewood, but it was Bedford County, honoring these two guys. He crashed the dinner and took the attention away from those two well-respected, well-liked state representatives, and touted himself and so forth. And it made the papers and so forth, and boy, did I carry Bedford County. And I actually lost Blair County. I lost the city of Altoona because he was represented them, but I got the outlying districts in Blair County. I lost by a little bit, and I ended up winning by 1,200 votes. Wasn't easy.
A squeaker.
Yeah, well, I had to campaign. Last year I was campaigning to be reelected as a trustee for Penn State, so I know how to campaign. And frankly, I really enjoy campaigning. I really do. Most people don't, but I like people.
Did you learn then in that first election about how to deal with the media?
Yeah, I think I had dealt with the media on some other issues, but I always was. People were always scared to death of the media. I wasn't. I was very comfortable on television or with the print media. It didn't matter. And sometimes I probably talked too much, but I don't know whether I had to learn at that time. I think I had already passed the learning stage.
You were 37?
Pardon me?
37 years old when you were elected?
Yes.
So you were not a kid?
No. You're right. I was 37 years old. And but I always liked the media. And I knew who were the good guys and who the guys to watch out for when I got to Harrisburg. That's for sure. It was a different world when I got to Harrisburg with the media.
So you arrive in Harrisburg as a freshly elected senator. What kind of shape was the state in at the time?
Oh, well, I think Pennsylvania had the worst governor in its history, and sadly, I think he was slipping because later he I think had some Alzheimer's issues. Milton Shapp. It's the second term of Milton Shapp, not the first term. The first term he got some accolades from the media. The second term, he turned it over to his staff almost, and he was in the background as governor, and his staff was running things. PennDOT was just full of patronage, and it was a terrible time. And the Democrats were in charge of the Senate at that time, and it was they were not performing in a way that you would expect. That they certainly had to bear the brunt of the Shapp administration, and it was corrupt, pure and simple. It was a corrupt administration. And it was difficult for me as a freshman freshman legislator, to get anything done. I was on the Labor and Industry Committee. I can remember wanting to offer an amendment in committee, and the chairman refused to let me do it. Why? You have to do that some different way. I don't remember. But, everything was done in secret, too. And the Sunshine Law evolved over things like that, and I was part of that. So
How'd you learn to be a senator?
I don't know. I'm not sure. You learn.
Was there some senior senator who took you under his wing and said, let me
Yeah,
tell you
there
a thing
were.
or two?
Yeah, and probably Henry Hager would be the one. And interesting, I just had dinner with him a couple weeks ago, and he was from Williamsport at the time. He was a true leader in many ways, and had one time ran for governor. But he took me under his wing, and without Henry Hager, you wouldn't have that book in your hands, and it really tells the story of him when the Republican, took over the Senate, and he bumped the then minority leader, and he bumped him. He was going to be president pro tem, and he supported me to be majority leader. Well, let me tell you, that was 6 years after I was elected. I was about as green can be.
Did people think that was pretty presumptuous of you to run for leadership?
I don't know. I never got that kind of feedback, but I had to learn. I can remember sitting down with Jim Mandarino, who was a powerful member, the Democrat leader in the House, and we had to negotiate with him. And I would say no to everything. Then I'd go back and say, "You think this is all right?" And then I would call Jim. I said, "Hey, Jim, that's okay." Yeah, really, because I acknowledged, and it's again in the book, that I was green, and that I was. I learned quickly, and the fact is, I was in leadership for the rest of my career.
So, were you in the minority party for the first 6 years you were there? What was it like being in the minority party?
Terrible.
Did you get anything done?
No, it was terrible, and and we had, and even in our Republican caucus, I guess we had about 11 or 12 of us, maybe a few more. I can't remember exactly, but there was an old guard, and the old guard would play ball with the Democrats and get the stuff that they wanted. And then there was the Young Turks. And at that time, I was a Young Turk. And there was a leadership election, and I was put in the corner and asked to support the senator who eventually won. But I told him I wasn't going to vote for him. I was going to vote for somebody else.
What kind of shape financially was the state in?
I can't recall completely, but after Shapp came Thornburg, and Thornburg was like cleaning up the mess of Milton Shapp and getting the state on the right track, and it was much better. And so it wasn't in bad shape at that time, after at least the first term of Thornburg. Interesting, though, Thornburg had a scare on his reelection. He should have been reelected overwhelmingly, but those were the Watergate days and the Nixon time and so forth.
Well, when was your first reelection?
My first reelection would have been 1978.
Any opposition?
Yes, I had opposition every year, but every election but one, and I had opposition that time, but it was pretty easy. It wasn't anything. I won handily.
Were there things you had in mind as goals, things you wanted to accomplish?
At the time, the district I represented really had very little from Harrisburg. I wanted to be the guy that helped build up at least the important things that were needed in the district. I was fortunate to work with a congressman who was highly successful in Washington, Bud Schuster, and chairman of the Transportation Committee in the House, and a guy who was very interested in making his district, his congressional district, much better, and with Washington's help. So when Bud finally realized I was never going to run against him, because in the beginning, he looked, there's this young guy, you know, he represents this same, a big part of my district, and he's from the city of Altoona, which is the largest city. I better watch out for him, and he was a little cold. But when he realized I had no interest in Washington.
Why not?
I just didn't. I wanted to be home. I had young kids, and I just didn't want to go to Washington. I had no desire ever. I still don't. And I liked state government, and I wanted to rise to the highest that I possibly could, and I did. Well, I guess you can't say. I was never governor, but I did get to be lieutenant governor at one time. I don't know. It's just, there were so many things that I was able to do and bring back to the district and make the district feel good about themselves again. I mean, it was always, particularly in Altoona and Blair County, we get nothing from Harrisburg. Johnstown gets everything. And, there was a guy by the name of Murtha who made that happen. But when Bud Schuster and I got together, all of a sudden there was a Blair County ballpark, there was a convention center, there's Interstate 99, which is key to the economic future of the area.
Made it easier for you to get to Penn State.
Oh my, yes, it sure did. And so the district was starting to feel good about itself. And Johnstown was crying, why do they get, Murtha was gone. Why does Altoona get everything and we're not getting anything? So at any rate, that was fun for me to be able to help make the area better and feel good about themselves in the process.
So you were in office 6 years in the minority, and then suddenly you were the majority party and you were the majority leader. And was that when Dick Thornburg was governor?
Yeah, I was majority leader in 1980 because that's when Henry Hager became president pro tem and was really the leader in our caucus.
So he was the boss?
He was the boss. And basically went to Jack Stauffer, who should have ascended to he would be next in line and should have been the majority leader. But Henry Hager, we call him Merck, went to Stauffer and said, I'm going to support Bob Jubelirer for a majority leader, Jack, and I think it's a better position for him than it is for you. And he said, am I still going to be in leadership? And he said, absolutely, you'll be the whip. And so it worked out that 6 years after I set foot in Harrisburg as the senator from the 30th District of Pennsylvania, I was the majority leader.
So what did that involve? I mean, what kind of relationship did you have with the other senators in your caucus? How did you know which direction to go?
Well, it took some time, particularly the old guard. There was an old guard there that had been there a long time, and they were not Henry Hager. They were Dick Frame was the old guard minority leader, and he lost that election to Henry Hager. We were able to, I can tell you, I guess it was 10-9 or something like that. I think we had 19 at the time, and but I remember how that 10th vote came, and it wasn't easy, but that's another story for another day. But anyhow, I had a real learning curve to get through.
Did you get a nicer office?
Yes, I did, but that wasn't the important thing to me. I did. I had the majority leader's office, and I had a lot of responsibility. It wasn't just all fun and games. And by that time, Thornburg had been elected, and in 1978, I think Dick Thornburg was elected, and we needed to get things done, and he came with a staff that had been with him Department of Justice, I guess, and they were very good and very effective, but they were tough to deal with, and we had to get through, even though we were all on the same team. Dick, who I have the highest respect for, it's in the book. I grade the governors in the book, but I had great respect for Dick Thornburgh. He truly cleaned up the mess that Milton Schaap and his staff and that were running the state government made, and Dick Thornburgh, coming from the Department of Justice and so forth, he was a very good governor. He was a little isolated, but after any, as I say, he only won by 100,000 votes. You say, well, that's a lot. Well, it really isn't when you think of the millions of people who vote. But 1982, right in the middle of Watergate. So,
Was it Republican House, Senate, and governor at the time?
was there? I don't think so. I'm not sure about that. I wish I could tell you that, but I don't want to say it's absolutely so. But I don't think so. I think the House was in Democrat hands at that time.
Because if Governor Thornburgh was a Republican and a Republican Senate, you still had odds over your goals?
Had what?
Odds, differences over your goals?
Sure, absolutely. We had differences over goals. That's normal, but we would work them out. We would meet, and the Republican leadership would meet with the governor on a regular basis. And yes, we had differences, but we solved those differences. And remember, Dick Thornburgh and Bill Scranton III, who was lieutenant governor at that time, had to deal with the 3 Mile Island situation, and that was not an easy. They did a terrific job, and there was a lot. So they got off to a good start because they had a real success with the 3 Mile Island thing. And I was in Harrisburg at the time. I said, "Holy cow! I hope I'm not contaminated." Yeah, but that was something.
What were the caucus meetings like?
That's a great question. They were lively because you still had that old guard. That there was probably maybe 8, 9 old guard members who looked at this young guy sitting there at the leaders' table in the caucus with the president pro tem and the caucus leadership, all the caucus leadership, and the only one that was on that maintained his position from before was Dick Tillman, who was a phenomenal human being, and he was the appropriations chairman, and we kept him on as appropriations chairman. Dick just passed away recently at 96, and but he was in the Marines. He was at the I'm trying to think of the name where they raised the flag on the
Iwo Jima?
Iwo Jima. Thank you. He was at Iwo Jima. He would never ever talk about it, where they raised that flag. And but he was a Marine, and he was just a tremendous human being.
Well, you talk a lot about the individuals you encountered in your career, and you talked about the Big Five, and you mentioned Henry Hager and Dick Tillman, and you also have Senator Brightbill and Senator Loper.
Right.
What is it about them that stood out?
Well, I supported both of them. First, Joe Loper became the majority whip, and when he and I were very close, and we kept the caucus together. Right now, the Republican caucus has 34, and we were lucky to have 26. And I tell you a funny story. When one of our members thought he was not going to run again, he had a place in Florida, in the Keys in Florida. And Joe and I said, we got to go see him. It was Ed Helfrich from Northumberland County. And he said, I said, Joe, we need to get down and see Ed. We're in trouble if he doesn't, because if he ran, we knew he'd win. But if he doesn't run, there was a young House member who very well could have won that seat. So Joe and I hop on a plane. We get to Miami, and then we rent a car to go to the Keys. Well, they had this special on a Mercedes, and at same price as a Chevrolet. So, we'll take a Mercedes. And anyhow, we get started, and I said, Joe, and it's night. It's dark, and we don't know. We didn't have a GPS. We were driving and hoping we knew what we were doing. And I said, Joe, take a look at the gas range. You know, we figured it was filled up. When we got it, they've always fill them up. Well, maybe the dial goes the other way. And I said, Joe, we better stop at a gas station. Well, it's pretty hard to find a gas station on the way down. We finally found one. Nobody spoke English. They're all Spanish. It was pitch black, and we asked about the gas. I couldn't find the gas tank. Where do you open it at? Anyhow, we're all looking around for the gas tank opening. These guys are underneath the car. They're doing everything. It was a simple place. It was at a very simple place. We finally found it, and it took a full tank. That's all I can tell you. If we had gone any farther, it would have. We would have run out of gas about 2 o'clock in the morning, and it wouldn't have been. That would not have been fun. But we got there, and Ed Helfrich said to us, hey, it was nice of you guys to come here. By the way, I've changed my mind. I think I'm going to run. So we didn't even need to go. But and Joe and I are laughing so hard that we had made this trip. It was not an easy trip. But the goal had already been reached before we got there. So it was a lot of fun.
Were you the majority party the whole time you were in leadership?
That's a wonderful question because it requires another story. The answer probably should be yes, but a guy by the name of Frank Pecora, who's passed away from Allegheny County, we were 26-24, flipped, and became, and I'm trying to think of the year, or it's in the book, but I can't remember it right now, flipped and became a Democrat. And that made it 25-25, and Mark Singal was the lieutenant governor under Bob Casey, cast the tie-breaking vote. So we lost our power. At any rate, I smelled something I'll never forget. And I said, Joe, something's going on with Frank. Frank was tough. He really was. He played games like no other politician that I ever dealt with played. And there was always something Frank wanted, and he knew that he had the leverage because we needed to have 26 votes, so we needed everybody. And I said to Joe Loper, get us out of here, get us in recess, do something. Something's going on, and I'm not sure what it is. Let's get the hell out of here. And Joe moved to recess for the purpose of a Republican caucus. The Democrats objected, and of course Frank Pecora voted with the Democrats then. He voted no, and then it was like a banana republic revolution. It was all hell broke loose because the next motion was I moved for the election of the President pro tempore of the Senate. It was not the normal time, but they did, and with the same vote, with Frank voting with them, they were successful. I was ousted, and Bob Mello, who was the minority leader, became President pro tempore for not a very long period of time. But The games they played were really, really, I mean, it was rough stuff. But so I later became minority leader. Joe became minority whip. And but that was one of the lowlights of my career, but it's still a great story. And later on, when there was election, Mark Single kept delaying an election in Bucks County because he knew it was going to go Republican. And once it did go Republican, we were back in the majority. So we were out, I don't know, period of 16, 17 months or something like that.
I want to ask you about something that's in your book, because you mentioned the word power, and in your book you say politics is, has been, and always will be about the exercise of power.
Right.
When did you feel power as a senator?
You know, I guess it was a while after I was made majority leader. I didn't feel it when I first was anointed, so to speak. But what would happen? I would park my car, and I would walk up the Capitol steps, and I would look up at that building, and I'd say, my God, I have an office there. You know, I'm in top leadership. I've got to really do a good job here. And it evolved over a period of time. It wasn't just like one day all of a sudden I have power. It evolved. And I realized that I could make that power work in a good way. And I did for my district particularly. And for the Commonwealth where it was required. I traveled all over the Commonwealth. And I worked with every governor. But I realized that my life had changed. It was never going to be the same again. Well, at least it didn't appear so unless they threw me out. But with that position came significant power.
Why did you decide to do a book?
Because I had such a great career and so many stories, and you've already gotten quite a few of them. And talking with David Atkinson particularly, I said, a lot of people are asking me to write a book and on my career. And I said, you know, maybe it's something we ought to consider. So David was the key player. And then we thought, who are we going to get to write this book? And lo and behold, we came upon somebody I knew very well, liked a lot, staunch Democrat, worked for Bob Casey as his press secretary, Vince Caroci.
He's been on this program.
Well, he's written more books than I have, that's for sure. He's written a number of books, and that was a key to it, too. And the fact that I knew Vince, and I think he was with Blue Cross Blue Shield at the time, we asked him to do this. And so he thought about it, and he said, you sure? You know, I'm a Casey Democrat. And I said, Vince, if you can write the story the way I tell it, that's all I'm asking. And it's not what you think, it's what I think. And he took a little time, and he said, I'll do it. And he did a great job.
So how'd you do it? Did you just sit and talk for weeks?
Into I guess a microphone on some kind of a recording device, and he was able to take the tape or the disc or whatever it was. It was in my office at Obermeyer at that time in Harrisburg, and it was in the conference room, and David Atkinson and Vince Caroci were there, John Gianelli, Steve McNett. These are people that were key to my career, and they would stop in. Mike Long came in for a while, but David and was there constantly with Vince, and would sometimes offer up things that Vince wasn't aware of.
You start off your book with the pay raise.
I started the last chapter first.
Why'd you do it that way?
What'd you think? I thought it was a nice, well, I thought it wasn't my idea. I'm not going to take credit for it. But Vince and David thought of this. Why not? Why not do that? You see it in the movies from time to time where there are flashbacks or where things start at the end and then they fast forward or fast backward into the to why this particular incident happened. And we thought it was a good idea. And to say, you know, this was the end of my career and all the good and all the things I did, this was not my idea, this pay raise.
Whose idea was it?
I hate to tell you. I mean, I don't mind telling you, but he passed away. It was at that time, I guess he was Chief Justice, Ralph Cappy. And he came to the leadership and said, you've got to do something. We're losing judges right and left. And they're not going to stay, a good judge isn't going to stay at this pay scale. They can go out in the private sector and make way more money than we're doing. So anyhow, it's my biggest regret because you can't do a pay raise bill for judges without doing it for the legislative branch and the executive branch. You can't get the votes. And so John Purcell was speaker, I guess, at the time, and he was very much for it. I was hesitant. I had great respect for Ralph Cappy. And, you know, my father being a judge, he wasn't at that time, he had passed away. But the other thing was my wife had just been elected judge. And I didn't want her to, frankly, she was ready to reject it if it ever passed. And so that's how it happened. Ralph had this plan of tying it to the federal government, which frankly, when in hindsight, was not very smart because their pay raises come very rarely in Congress. And I think we would have been behind because we had a COLA in there with the cost of living. Now, the cost of living adjustments have been very small because inflation has been non-existent. But that's how it started. It's obviously my biggest regret that I didn't tell Ralph, we can't do this.
Well, if you had doubts about it at the time, were you still, since you were in the leadership, responsible for going out and pushing it to your members?
Yes, I was. I'm not going to deny that. It wasn't, and Bob Mello was solidly for it. Vince Fumo was solidly for it. On the Democratic side, and we had enough on our side that. But the one thing that I guess I'd say I resent the media, what they do. They say it's always late at night and so forth.
Well, it was 2 o'clock in the morning.
I know, but every member of the press was in attendance. They don't say that. And didn't matter when it was. It would have been the same thing. It happened to be that was the end of a session. And it was the last thing that got done in that session. But every single member of the press, the media, was in the back of that Senate. So there was no secrets going on in any way, shape whatsoever. We didn't try to duck the media. We knew that first of all, I wouldn't have put up with that. And nobody would have really. So at any rate, as I said in the book, it was I make mistakes. This was a beauty, and I paid a price for it. I paid I got the death penalty, and as sad as I was, we had some more things that we had things to do. And some interest in the district that we wanted to finish, and we never got a chance. But having said that, it is what it is, and you move on to other things, and that's exactly what I did.
So as you look back on your career in the Senate, and as you were putting this book together, what are your big hits, your accomplishments, and what was left undone?
Oh, boy. Well, I would say, just for the media's sake, the Sunshine Bill, certainly, there's two pieces that took 5 years each. The Sunshine Bill was one of them, and it was the new Sunshine Bill. The old one had been done some years before and had pretty much been discarded by the court's decisions. And so there was no effect. There was a time when committee meetings were held and the door closed and the media was not invited in. We wanted to make sure that we put in legislation that was going to change that. Ned Freer, who was the publisher of the Bedford Gazette, he got me into this. He was a good friend, constituent, and he said, "Bob, you got to do this. We really need to amend that Sunshine Act. We're really getting hammered everywhere, every meeting, every place we go, as part of the media. And these things are happening." And so 5 years later, after lots of negotiation, I had to negotiate my own caucus. I negotiated with my really good friend, whose son happens to be majority leader right now, Doyle Corman. And Doyle was great. We negotiated, but we truly negotiated. It wasn't, he was fair, and what he did, Doyle had been a county commissioner at one time before he became a senator. And so we did negotiate, and we came to an agreement, and it was really, nobody thought we could ever get it through, but we did. And it's the same law today, amended, and whether it's enforced or not has always been the issue since then. If they enforce it, then we'd be fine. That was important. I just forwarded to my daughter the papers that she now has control of the tuition account plan that my grandson's at Penn State now, but my granddaughter, Tulane University. Anyhow, she's getting ready to go. And so my daughter, I made arrangements to help them with college tuitions for several years. And so I wanted her to have control, but that was my bill. And that tuition account plan. And I had, oh my gosh, for some reason, Governor Casey made it very difficult for me. And then Senator Jeanette Reedman, who was the expert on education, she wasn't crazy about it at the time until she finally changed. And Governor Casey finally signed the bill into law. That is huge. Let me tell you, there are kids who are going to college who would never would be able to go to college if it wasn't for the tuition account plan. It's grown tremendously, and obviously we're pretty proud of it.
Well, there's a lot more to talk about, but unfortunately we are out of time.
We can't be. We just started.
We've been speaking with Senator Bob Jubelirer. He is the author of this book, The Senate Will Come to Order, but the Politics May Be Messy. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I enjoyed being here.
You've been listening to a podcast of PA Books, a production of PCN, the Pennsylvania Cable Network. We'd like to hear from you. Our email address is pabooks@pcntv.com. Like us on Facebook to learn more about PA Books.